So,
So sorry.
in 1973, February 1973, George Harrison donated this magnificent building and estate to the Hare Krishna movement. So in acknowledgement of that, there's this little plaque here with George's name on it. I'll read it out to you. His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Shrine Prabhupada, and members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness of Great Britain would like to express their eternal gratitude to Sriman George Harrison for his liberal donation of Bhaktivedanta Manor and grounds in the service of Lord Sri Krishna. Sriman is a term of respect, like saying sir in a religious way. Yeah, so it's a nice little plaque there. So now we're going to go upstairs to Prabhupada's rooms.
Oh my.
All right.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. It's come when it felt like it. So sometimes you get some Harry.
I like about this
people
beautiful
who wouldn't.
room.
Why not? Why not? Why not like it?
Right.
And in the morning, you'll see there's like sun rays coming through the window.
And this is where George would meditate, or where he would chant. And
he would talk to Prabhupada, for example, or they sometimes do kirtan. There's once when George saw this window and he said, "Oh, I love the way the sun shines through the window in the morning." You know, that's my Scottish accent. I can do those things.
Are you from Scotland?
The sun shines through the window. No, I'm from Birmingham.
That was your George accent.
That was my George accent. Yeah.
I got it.
Check out that car. It's a roller there.
Somebody's rolls.
Yeah, it's a nice one.
Is that for the wedding?
Yeah, not my car.
We had someone in Louisville recently who arrived on an elephant.
So now we're at the point of a shady lake walk at Bhaktivedanta Manor. But now we're entering into the realm of the official George Harrison garden. We'll go in here. A lot of the foliage and so forth, some of it was taken from Fry Park itself and planted here by some of his garden staff that are still working at Fry Park today. But let's have a look at the garden. So it's a huge figure of 8 shape, maybe the shape of infinity if you like. We've got this outer ring here going out, and there's this dell. Now George actually kind of liked this dell area. In the early 70s it was basically like almost like a redundant area. But he saw it, he said, "Oh, they make a really nice sunken garden that would, you know." Because even at that point he was into landscape gardening. So what we did, we made a sunken garden. Along the outer part of the garden, there's different references to some of George's songs from his solo albums, whether it was My Sweet Lord, Living in the Material World album, whatever it may be, and of course his Dark Horse tour as well. And of course we believe those to have spiritual meanings or spiritual references in not just George's journey, but of course anyone's journey. And when this garden was opened by Olivia with Monty Don from Gardeners World, who is famous in the UK, Monty Don quite wisely actually said that the garden gives you what you give the garden, not about planting but about your love. The garden loves you back. And Olivia added that whatever faith one has or whatever journey one is on, the garden will mean different things to you, and you relate to the garden in different ways. Some people walk through, some people will ignore it, some people will sit and chant, some people will do yoga, and that's fine. Everyone's got their path. And that's something that actually Olivia said about George. She felt that he embraced a lot of different paths and respected all manifestations of spirituality. So let's have a walk through.
All right, so forgive me, but I've asked you to start again.
Okay, so I'm going to tell a quick story about the 2 times that I met George in 1996. There was when Bhaktivedanta Manor was saved from closure by the local council. George was invited to a celebratory dinner here at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and he turned up, of course, very happy to do so. And of course, this was kind of quite an exclusive dinner. I mean, I was too young, I was the next generation down. There was no chance I was going to be invited to this dinner. But nevertheless, the temple leaders and of course got to meet George directly at that point. But George was the kind of person who was actually quite humble and down to earth regardless of his fame, and you could tell he didn't have any pretension about him whatsoever, it seemed. He seemed to be quite, in one sense, intolerant of pretentiousness, because he'd seen all that. He'd been in the rock and roll circuit, obviously, very much so in fact. And I think he was just ready, he just wanted genuine spiritual life and wanted to be around genuine spiritual people, but he didn't want to be hassled, you see. To the point where I suppose he just wanted to be a normal person, And anyway, at one point
well done.
He was walking down the corridor of the Manor, and I couldn't help it. Me and my friend said to him, "Oh, I really appreciate you donating this place. You don't know what it means. You've done a great thing donating this building." And George just went, "Oh, thanks very much. That's nice to know." So there was that sense of not really wanting wanting to kind of more attention on himself, or there was no ego there in a sense, which I found with George. But after that, he disappeared. Not after speaking to me, but he an hour later after the programme, he disappeared into the grounds of Bhaktivedanta Manor. Obviously, George was used to trying to find space for himself, and he was used to that at Friar Park. And by this time, I'd given up having any hope of meeting George again. What being a young boy, relatively young at the time, and yet just over the other side of this garden here, at the time this was just grass, the other side of this garden there, just by the other side of this tree, I was walking around doing my Hare Krishna chanting with my beads, and there was George, and I'll take you there. So I was coming down this way, doing my Hare Krishna chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And there by himself, obviously someone who had managed to break free from the maddening crowds, as it were, was George with his white bead bag coming down here. And then something said to me, however, something told me, don't hassle him, let him be, let it be. Because he was obviously the kind of person who didn't want or didn't need that kind of fandom, that "oh, give me your autograph" kind of thing. He was almost like above and beyond that. It hadn't gone to his head, and then I felt, you know what I'm going to do? A smile and a Hare Krishna pranam would be enough. And he responded with that pranam. But there was a sense of, almost like a subtle sense of understanding. There's nothing I could tell him he didn't know about Krishna, and maybe there was not a lot he could have told me in a sense. It was just this mutual standoff in a way. But there was something about George which I felt was quite special. He'd, unlike a lot of famous people or ex-rock stars or whoever, he'd penetrated a certain barrier. He'd actually gone beyond a certain point, and I think he'd kind of understood that we have to cross the ego barrier, all of us, whether it's him, whether it's us. And there was a sense of, look, I know what it's like. You've got to dig deeper. Otherwise you're going to be stuck in this cycle of repeated birth and death for a very long time. And George had kind of taken that route. He'd kind of understood that quite deeply. He really had. So he was born with it. It must have been from a previous life. Let's have a now look. We're now going to go to the George Harrison garden that was officially opened by his widow Olivia a few years ago. things here. For example, here we have "My Sweet Lord" written into the tree. If you look at this side, you can see it. But this is interesting, though, isn't it? Because it's quite subtle. You don't see it unless you know it's there. Just like Krishna, you don't see him unless you know he's there. But you look up and you see "My Sweet Lord," but then you realise, you end up looking further up and you realise it's part of a much longer journey, a much taller tree. And yet this is the tallest tree in the George Harrison garden. So this is basically full of symbolism. This is also a nice part, almost like a secluded part of the garden. We turn around here, we turn to the left, and you see a little pillar here which says, "He whose sweetness flows." Because a lot of the time, whether it was from George's songs when he was still in the Beatles, like "Something in the way she moves attracts me like no other lover," and so on. And "Here comes the sun, do-do-do-do. It's alright, da-na-na, da-na-na, da-na, sun, 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 here we come." So according to Sham Sundar, aka Sam Spearster, these were actually written during his awakening, if you like, for the Krishna consciousness. So in George's songs and albums, you'll find subtle references or little gems, as it were, referring to similar things. Favourite benches, artistically carved into the wooden armrests here. We've got Om and a lotus symbol, almost like a mandala here, a yantra Om. And this is where one of my favourite places I like to sit and chant, actually. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. Hare Krishna, thank you for joining us on this journey of Bhaktivedanta Manor and the George Harrison Garden. Take care.
And here comes the sun.
Here comes the sun.
I cannot tell you how much I personally appreciate this and how much all the people who will watch this will appreciate this. Hare Krishna.